What's up, my snarf goobers? I finished Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, and there's a kind of a reason that the second volume took me so long to read. The first volume was really good, and I was pretty intrigued the whole time, but the second volume, a lot of people say it fell off, and I'd sort of have a similar opinion, but let's just first talk about the first volume, because the first volume was really good pretty much the whole way through. I finished that thing in like less than a week, a few days, because I couldn't put it down. It was so good. If you've read Court of Owls, that's probably the best story in it, in my opinion. But it's just a really good Batman story. I'm not going to go through and explain every single story that's there, but the Court of Owls story is my favorite one, if you haven't read that one. They have it in the DC Compact now, so if you just want to read that one, it's good. But basically, it's about a secret society of rich people that run Gotham, and Batman's basically like trying to take him down, kind of. So it's really good. If you like, stories about rich people and corruption and whatever, then you'll probably like that one. But the second volume is what I'd like to talk to, because it does kind of take a dip in quality. Now, at the end of the first volume, Batman and this girl were talking to Catwoman about some sort of underground crime ring or whatever. But whenever the second volume starts, we never get to hear about what happened with that. They literally just leave you on a cliffhanger that never gets resolved, which is really stupid. And it honestly made me lose a lot of the energy I had to read the second volume that I had in the first one, because I really wanted to know what was going to happen next in that, and it's never answered. Another thing is that the second volume also has sections that are a lot more wordy than the first volume. And I'm fine with comics being wordy sometimes, but something that's been really annoying me lately is stuff like Starman or this Batman they'll be really wordy for no reason. Like, they just don't need to be that wordy. And then I'm just here stuck reading it because I don't want to miss anything that might be important. But I end up just reading so many words that they're just filler. Like, they're literally just fluff, which is annoying. I hate it when writers do that. There's not nearly as much of that in this as there are in Starman, though. If you don't like really wordy stuff, you probably might still like this, because it's still present, but it's not nearly as common as it was in Starman. That's not a really big complaint for me with this. So that's not really like a huge deal. What is a huge deal, not a huge deal necessarily, is that the villains, one of the main villains in this part in volume 2 is this guy that has he's got like this weird flower thing on his face, and he puts these, I think they're like pills or something, around Gotham, and they give people weird like stretchy Slenderman powers or something. It's stupid, and his motivation is stupid, and he's taken over the whole city. And okay, here's something I don't really like about certain villains in comics is they're super powerful, but their motivations are sometimes just lacking, to be honest. Like, here's something I'll say about DC in general versus Marvel. DC, I feel like, they have better stories, but they don't have better characters per se. Marvel has really good characters, but their stories are just kind of like meh. Though that's my general opinion about both. There's outliers for both companies, obviously, but in terms of like how many I've read from each, that's generally the feeling that I get. So when I want more character-driven things, I read Marvel. When I want more story-driven things, I read DC. But so like the character motivations matter, okay? Like, I don't care if someone's taking over the city if their motivation is stupid. It just makes me kind of like. Also, spoilers. There's a section in okay, so this is major spoilers actually. Like, click off the video right now if you don't want this spoiler. But Batman dies like multiple times in this story, and he has this like cloning device that he set up as a failsafe to make sure that there's a Batman that's always like protecting the city. And he made it to where like the clone will be uploaded with his memories and his dark past, so that they're also motivated to fight crime and stuff. But the first time he dies in the story, it's not necessarily finished, so Alfred still has to work on it. And in the meantime, Commissioner Gordon becomes Batman, and I'm just like, out of all the people to replace Batman, you chose Commissioner Gordon. Like, I don't hate Commissioner Gordon, but he's not very cool. You could have chosen Azrael, my favorite Batman replacement. You could have chosen Dick Grayson. You could have chosen Jason Todd. You could have chosen Damian Wayne. You could have chosen Tim Allen. No, wait, no. Tim Drake. That's what his name is. Is it Tim Drake? Yeah, I think it is. You could have chosen literally any of them, but you chose Commissioner Gordon, like a smoker in his 40s that isn't very athletic, and to be honest, it just, I just didn't really like it that much. And the arc's not that short either. It's a pretty long arc, so that's another reason I got through it way slower. Sometimes, like, I sometimes gone weeks, sometimes even a month without even reading any of it, just because I'm like, let's go back to the Commissioner Gordon arc. But I will say, Volume 2 does pick up at the end, because then we get to the Omega plot line. And I don't want to spoil what that is too much, but basically, Batman dies again, which I don't know how you guys feel about Batman dying over and over, just being brought back. If it's some sort of like cheap plot thing, I don't mind it that much personally, because Batman isn't a super powerful character in this iteration of Batman. He fails sometimes. He's not always the strongest. He doesn't just pull some bullshit explanation out of his ass like a fucking JoJo character, Sherlock Holmes, of why he beats every situation. He does have his moments, like he still does that, but not every single time. Like, the reason he dies sometimes in the story is because he's not a perfect Batman in the story, which I actually found was fine. And the reviving thing didn't feel too overpowered, because it's kind of like he's just a regular guy. So one regular guy, like, yes, you can kill him and he'll come back, but he's still just a regular guy. So even if he comes back, he's not guaranteed to be able to beat the thing he lost against last time. But for the final Omega story, Batman dies, he comes back and he's in an insane asylum, and it turns out Batman was just a delusion and he killed his parents, but then it turns out that it actually wasn't, and Alfred just made that because he was tired of Batman being Batman, because apparently the world was destroyed by this guy named Omega, and whenever Batman was revived, Alfred just wanted to, like, live out their lives as just like a normal family. But so he created this, like, fake Silicon Valley world where all of his villains were just psychiatrists and physical therapists and whatnot, and it's insane. And then Batman ends up, like, figuring it out almost immediately because he's not stupid, and Alfred's just like, well, shit. I mean, I'm not saying I totally didn't expect you to figure it out, but I did spend a lot of time working on this, even though it wasn't done. And then Batman, goes and tries to go figure out who Omega was and stop him, and it's a pretty cool story, and who Omega actually is a pretty cool twist. I feel like they could have paced it a little bit better, because Batman's sort of they're kind of just like telling and not necessarily showing for a lot of it, because they need to catch the reader up on everything that's happened since Batman died and was reborn. So there's a lot of talking between him and Diana, which is fine. I didn't hate it, but I kind of wish that the story, he just sort of figured it out over time. Something that was a little bit goofy, though, was that Joker was just a head in a jar for, like, majority of this, but he was being kept alive by, like, cybernetics. And then near the end of the story, like, he has this suit that, like, he can control with his nerves in his neck or something, and he becomes, like, an ally of the Batman group, and he just seemed a lot more goofy, a lot more 80s Jokerish, if you know what I mean. Like, he didn't seem like a super menacing psychopath Joker anymore, but in his defense, he was buried underground in the sand for, like, 10 years, like, so, I don't know. If I had to give Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo a rating out of 10, I'm going to rate the volume separately and then give them an overall rating. For Volume 1, I'd give it like a 9 out of 10. For Volume 2, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10, maybe like a 6.5. I'm leaning more towards 7, though, mainly just because it has some parts that I didn't find necessarily interesting, but that's more of just a personal preference, because I didn't like the Gordon stuff and some of the other stuff that was in there. If you guys would be interested in Gordon becoming Batman, then, like, you'd probably like it. But me personally, I didn't really click with those arcs. But like I said, it picked up at the end. A lot of people say it fell off. I feel like it just dipped a little bit and then came back up at the end. But overall, I'd give them both an 8.5 out of 10. This is a great Batman story, and a lot of people say like, if you haven't read any Batman stories, this is a good place to start, is Volume 1 of Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. And I don't totally disagree. I mean, it's not a bad place to start at all. Court of Owls is fire. Pretty much every story in the first part is fire, except a little bit near the end with that Catwoman stuff. I don't know why they just didn't finish that. That was a little bit annoying to me. Also, if you don't like, sometimes they'll tell like a little short story of, you know, a one-off Batman case in the middle of the story. I'm not really a huge fan of that because I feel like it interrupts the pacing a little bit, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Some people like little short stories like that. It's just not necessarily always for me in this Batman story, but that doesn't necessarily mean it brings it down for your average reader. I'm just saying for things I personally look for in a story, those things took it down a little bit. But overall, I'd recommend it. It was a great Batman story, and I did like reading it. So that's all I had to say, I guess. I'll see ya.